Good morning. So I'm here to talk to you about a project I've been working on with the students at RIT and an incredible photojournalist named Brenda Ann Keneally. Brenda has been documenting the lives of a group of women living in upstate New York. The story begins with Kayla and Sabrina, two young women who came together to raise a child. But the story quickly moved much farther beyond the scope of Kayla and Sabrina to include their family and friends and their community. Brenda spent 9 years making these photographs and making videos and documenting the lives of all of these women. She also started to collect documents that reflected their life. She collected letters like this, which is a letter written from prison. She has over 600 of these letters. She collected school reports, the minutiae of our lives that relates to everybody. And these documents are really important because they give us a broader picture of these women's lives beyond the photographs, which are so powerful. She also spent a lot of time thinking about the historical context of the women in the photographs and the women that she got to know. Troy was a very early point of industrialization in the United States, and that history has a direct impact on the women. And in some ways, these women are the daughters of these factory workers in Troy. The history of the development of social policy is also a really important part of this story. And all of this helps you to contextualize the economic inequality that these women are facing. Believe it or not, even SpongeBob has a role in our story, which I'll explain a little bit later. But unfortunately, the story of Kayla and Sabrina and their family and friends is much bigger than I have time to share with you today. I came here today to talk to you about how we were inspired by this story to find new ways to tell it. About a year and a half ago, Brenda Ann Keneally showed up at RIT with a trunk full of hard drives. The students and I pulled him out of the car and started to think about how can we organize all of this material. This was 9 years of videos and photographs, historical photographs, letters. She said, "Oh, I have a few letters." She had 600 letters. So we began to work with this massive mound of information and to think about how can we tell this story? How can we make a documentary from this work? And we soon started to realize that if we tried to reduce this mountain, that we were starting to reduce and summarize the story, which is a problem that happens a lot with the story of poverty, that it's summarized. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted it to be expanding rather than shrinking. And then we realized that the internet was the best place for this story to live, because the internet allowed us to expand rather than contract. And it allowed us the possibility of creating an experience that's a unique experience to each individual, an interactive experience. So we began the process of organizing this monster of data. 13 terabytes of data. Hundreds. I can't even think about how many hundreds of hours. I estimate between 300 and 600 hours of video. It took 15 students 10 weeks to just lay the first layer down of information onto the metadata onto the files. And at one point I asked the students what it felt like to work in a metadata sweatshop. But we were so inspired, and the students were so inspired by these women's stories, by the intimacy of the material, and by Brenda's devotion to the work that she had done for 9 years, that the keywording it was easy. And it continues to be relatively easy. Luckily, around that time, I met an incredible professor at RIT named Jeffrey Sonstein. He teaches in the Information Sciences department at RIT. And Jeff has long been interested in how data can tell stories. And fortunately for us, Jeff understood where we were and our dilemma, which I was really grateful for, because let me tell you, it's a scary thing to stare 13 terabytes of information in the face and not have a plan. Jeff created a tool for us that allowed us to search the information, to think about the information, and suddenly we could look up information like birthdays, SpongeBob SquarePants, prison. And we could start to think about telling these stories of these women's lives in different ways. Can you imagine telling the story of two women's lives for 9 years with the word SpongeBob? Or birthdays? Or prison? But the amazing thing about this was that we weren't restricted to the narrative of prison or poverty, which is so common in the coverage, or the media coverage of this issue. All of a sudden, SpongeBob became important, because SpongeBob is important, because he's a part of a bigger life. So we had these myriad of ways of working through this material and these women's lives. And that was incredible. And we started to realize how important the metadata we were adding to these files was. And then we started to realize that certain words and metadata were emerging from the material that were unique to the material. Words that we wouldn't use, like baby daddy, douchebag, or SSI. And these words helped to tell the story in a different way, in a way that we wouldn't have considered, but they were coming from the data itself. We call this troicabulary. And the troicabulary was a real turning point. And to me, I think it's kind of mind-blowing, because this is where things get really exciting. All of a sudden, coming from a history where you use photos, video, and data to tell a story, we were learning from that data, from those photos, what the story was about. It kind of turned the whole process right upside on its head. And for somebody who's been working in journalism for 20 years, that's mind-blowing. To me, it's a kind of new journalism. So that brings me back to what we're talking about today, which is impact. For me, the way that you really have impact is by creating an individual and unique experience with another person that removes barriers like stereotypes and preconceptions. If our tool and our web experience are working, then all of a sudden, that gives SpongeBob SquarePants the power to open a door of understanding to complexities like income inequality. Thank you.